Bonus episode. Let's fix tanking. Welcome to Chucking Darts, a podcast of informed, rigorous, reckless, harmless, speculative, and fun predictions about the game we love. You can call me Chuck. The last episode I released was probably at the end, probably right before like the end of the week of February the 9th, probably around February 12th or 13th, episode number 238 with Bennett Herbert at BenDog28 on Twitter, which was about the Spurs and sort of the title picture and the Spurs title chances, as well as the number one pick in the 2026 draft. And I wanted to discuss six, yes, six candidates for that selection. So we went through Darren Peterson, Cam Boozer, AJ Bonsa, but also Caleb Wilson, Kingston Flemings, and Keaton Wagler, who's my guy. Not for number one. I just am a big fan of Keaton's. So be sure to check that out. Bennett's great. Lots of great insight on the Spurs, very original draft thinker, and we had a very good conversation back and forth. So it is towards the end of All-Star weekend. They haven't played the All-Star game yet, but dunk contest and, NBA All-Star Saturday afternoon was yesterday. That was fun. I didn't mind that it was on earlier. It was fun for me. Just not means I don't have to stay up as late to watch it, but that's because I'm washed. The discussion, it seems, around All-Star weekend, if you aren't so intoxicated and entranced and captured and transfixed by things like the NBA's gambling partnerships and Giannis's gambling partnerships and the infiltration of AI into the viewing experience and how excited Adam Silver is about that. If all that wonderful news was not enough for you, the predominant conversation seemed to be about how to solve the tanking crisis. And I listened to Zach Lowe's show. He has done a good job, I think, recently running through ideas that have been permeating the league for quite some time. And since I have a draft podcast and I like way long ago shared my thoughts about this, I'm going to do so again with the benefit of some hindsight and tell you all what I think the right move would be here to stop all of this tanking, all of this purposeful losing, specifically in the second half of the season where it's most blatant, with Utah, Indiana, these other teams. So the idea that I heard that I like the most, I first heard from my buddy Matt Powers, who works at Swish Theory, which has been now used elsewhere. And I think what's likely, I mean, Zach Lowe said this idea has been floating around the league for years. So it's just possible that multiple people had the same good idea at different times. But it's to freeze the standings at a certain point. And once you freeze the standings, during the season, either lottery odds are set right there, or you can freeze the standings, sort of take a snapshot, and then what the team does the rest of the year contributes to their odds, where you correlate, winning with an increase in odds rather than only correlating losing with an increase in odds. So my version of this that I like the most is what I'm calling the New Year's freeze. The New Year's freeze. And it's simple enough in theory. It means that you freeze the standings on January the 1st. Now, once you freeze the standings on January the 1st and you take a snapshot, you take the bottom 7 teams. So lottery is obviously 14 teams deep. You take the bottom 7 in the standings on January the 1st and you say, okay, you 7 teams are now in a race to determine the odds of the top 7 odds by slot at the end of the year. For teams that are 8 through 14 on January the 1st, their odds are locked. And so, if I think, let's say, I think Milwaukee was 8th worst, or no, I think, sorry, like Utah and the Clippers were, I think, eighth and ninth on January the 1st of this year. That means that their odds are eighth and ninth, and they can do nothing to change those odds. So basically, their whole tanking was done on January the 1st, and 8 through 14 are just done. They're done. 1 through 7 on January the 1st, now basically their record for lottery odds purposes revert to zero. And for those 7 teams, they now are in a race where whoever wins the most or whoever has the best record, I suppose, because as I'll get into, not every team has played the same amount of games on January the 1st, but whoever has the highest win percentage from January 1st on would be in the number one slot for lottery odds. Now, currently, the system in the NBA is that the top 4 teams have equal lottery odds. I'm fine with keeping it that way. That's fine with me if that's what they want to do. But the purpose of this system would be to, first of all, eliminate tanking entirely from January 1st on, which it would absolutely do. There would be no benefit to losing whatsoever after January the 1st. From 8 to 14, those teams' odds are locked, so there's no tanking or maneuvering to get in position. For 1 through 7, losing only hurts you and is moving you down the lotto odds ladder closer to 7 than it is to 1. So tanking would be solved overnight from January 1st on. And the league would just be competitive as it can possibly be. You would see the best brand of basketball in the world night after night from January 1st on. Now, whenever these ideas get floated out, any idea, flattening the odds entirely or whatever, immediately immediately the first response is to be like, well, here's the con, here's the negative, and I'll get to the possible issues with this system in a moment and address those concerns. And I get that's why people, I get people, they think that way because number one, you want to check unintended consequences, and number two, like in sort of internet online world, whenever anyone says anything, not only the most popular thing, but almost the default thing that people do is try to figure out how to criticize it. So I get it, but I want to emphasize that if you freeze the standings on January the 1st, there is zero incentive to tanking. Zero after January the 1st. So why am I picking January the 1st? And most importantly, is January the 1st too early in the season to do it? Well, let's talk about it. On January the 1st, and it's very easy to look up, most teams have played between 32 and 35 games. Okay. NBA season is 82 games, which means there's basically between 47 and 50 games left after January the 1st under the current schedule. And this is assuming that the schedule doesn't get shortened or whatever. So between 47 and 50 games where there's zero benefit to tanking. Of course, there would be benefit to tanking up until January the 1st. And I think I'll just address these concerns one by one. Number one, the idea that, teams are just going to tank until January the 1st, then. You're just moving up the time that the teams are going to tank. Stars are going to sit out more early in the year. They're not going to rush their way back and all of this. Okay, there is some of that will happen, of course. But first of all, if you believe in the success and the sanctity of, the Emirates NBA Cup, which happens early in the season, then that would be a check against tanking. If you're a little bit more cynical and you think that tournament is nice, but silly, which is kind of what I think about it, is that it's nice but silly, then maybe some teams decide, you know what, playing hard and trying to win the cup just isn't as juicy as trying to get into that bottom 7, and we're going to really try to get into that bottom 7. Then there will be some tanking in those first 35 games. I think in particular, though, there would be some chicanery in December. Okay. And where I'm going with this is there will be teams under this system that would try to game it out to where they are as bad as they possibly can be on January the 1st, record wise. But then they're going to play really, really hard and rack as many wins as possible and essentially try to still have a successful season. They're going to try to have their cake and eat it too. They're going to try to lock in the best odds possible or even get in that bottom seven race and still try to make the playoffs and still try to win playoff series, you know? And that would, first of all, let's say a team pulled that off. Let's say a team won the NBA championship and they got in the top seven on January the 1st. They somehow managed to win the NBA title and lock in the best lottery odds simultaneously. First of all, awesome season. How fun would that be to follow? But you'd have a lot of upset teams who would call this a broken system and blah, 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 blah. So while that would be technically possible under odds like this, the reason I chose the bottom seven as opposed to the bottom 10 or the bottom 14 or whatever was to try to minimize the actual chances of something like that succeeding as much as humanly possible. Because in the play-in era, which technically the play-in tournament has been around since 2021, I think was like the first time they really tried it in practice. I think they tried a version of it in the bubble, but like the modern play-in tournament started in 2021. 2021, if you recall, was an abbreviated season because they're still coming out of COVID. So the first full season when this happened, where you could sort of retrofit this system for examination purposes, which is what I did, was 2022, which means we've had 4 seasons, 4 82 game seasons where the play-in tournament has occurred. 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025. All right. In that time, there has been one team that has been even out of the play-in on January the 1st, who then finished in the top 6 in their conference. Now notice, I just said out of the play-in, not in the bottom 7. There has been no team that has been in the bottom 7 record-wise on January the 1st and then made the top 6 so that they, have a guaranteed playoff series. The one team that went from outside the play-in to the top 6 was the 2022 Toronto Raptors, who, as you recall, that they surged in the second half of the season with a rookie Scotty Barnes, and that surge essentially won Scotty Barnes the Rookie of the Year award over Evan Mobley. They ended up playing the Sixers in the first round, and I think either got swept or lost 4-1, And so that's been the only time a team has even been out of the play-in on January 1st and just got in the top 6. It is a very, very difficult thing to do. I'm going to go through what this all would have looked like in each individual season, but I want to start with that preface. There has never been a team in the bottom 7 on January the 1st who then made the top 6. Now, there have been teams that have been outside the play-in and then made the play-in. Obviously, that's just moving up the standings a little bit. And there have been teams that have been in the play-in and then made the top 6. Of course, that's just moving up the standings. But only the 2022 Raptors were outside of the play-in on January 1st and then made the top 6 in this 4-year sample. Okay? And that illustrates how hard it is to dig yourself a hole even by January the 1st and then improve so much. Because, what you would really be worried about with a system like this, there's essentially like 2 problems with it, 2 possible criticisms. And again, this is judging against the amazing pro and positive that tanking after January 1st would disappear overnight. The problem would be solved. It would be done. Okay. The two problems are number one, the flip the switch team, which is what I'm talking about. Some team deciding that they're going to get cute, gamify some games in December and lose, lock in as good as possible their lottery odds on January 1st, and then just decide they're going to flip a switch and rip off a ton of wins and rise up to get, into the top four, the top three, the top two for lottery odds. And again, lottery odds doesn't guarantee you a given lottery pick. You can still get jumped. The Mavericks jumped a bunch of people this past year. The Hawks jumped a bunch of people the year before. It's just that, for if teams decide they're not going to make the playoffs right now, they tank because they have nothing better to do. They might as well maximize their lottery odds, or they might as well tank so that they keep a pick that's been protected for a certain range in trades. Like, I get it. But the actual theory of flipping the switch, like I've said, is much, much more difficult than to execute in practice. But Chuck, you might say, no, only one team has started outside the play-in and then made the top six because the systems have not incentivized doing that. The systems have incentivized if you're out of it, then you just tank. And so more teams are going to be trying to game the system. And so the odds are going to increase that a flip the switch team actually pulls this off. That, the Warriors decide to sit Jimmy Butler and Steph Curry or whatever, lock in as good lottery odds as they can. Even if they can't get into the top seven, maybe they lock in the eighth best lottery odds, and then they go and try like hell to compete for a title. Number one, if a team tries to do that, good on them, give it a shot. Try to lose some games in December and have it both ways. You can try to get cute, but it's a lot less cute than it seems when, I don't know, the team has a competitive roster and there's actual expectations that they're going to be pretty good. If there's expectations on a team that they're going to be pretty good, falling short of those expectations is going to get people fired. The teams that are executing the most aggressive tanks now are teams that don't have any expectation of being good. Teams like the Wizards or teams like the Pacers with Halliburton's injury, where Carlisle has all the goodwill in the world. Teams like the Jazz, where Will Hardy has been paid to suffer through this prolonged tank, this multi-years tank that they're executing. So it's the teams really without expectations that have organized themselves to play in this manner or to field purposefully less competitive teams than they could be fielding. And if you try to get cute, it means that there's been some communication up to ownership to be like, no, we can do both. Don't worry. We can be bad by January the 1st and still make the playoffs. Watch, we can still accomplish all the goals you want, owner. Just look up at the end of the year and look how well we've done. We're going to game the system. And though more teams might try because there will not be any tanking teams after January the 1st, that works both ways. The idea would be that even though more teams are trying, it's also going to be harder for those teams to fatten up on what my buddy Trill and Sam on Uniball call Mickey Mouse March. In the last few years, it's been easy to accumulate wins in February and March and early April if you want to, because so many other teams are not trying. But in a more competitive landscape, in the most possible competitive landscape, no win would be guaranteed to anybody. So to actually flip the switch would mean that there's no gimmies to rely on. You can't budget in wins because everything would be a dogfight. So that's number one. Actually flipping the switch is going to be much harder than it seems, number one. So if you want to try to get cute and you want to tank, okay, but you should do so with the expectation that sort of your realistic best case scenario is not to jump from the bottom seven into the top six and get yourself a playoff series, because no team has done that the last 4 years. And again, the only team that's gone from out of the play-in to a playoff series is the Raptors in 2022. Instead, if you actually make the bottom seven, your most like your realistic best case scenario, your realistic most positive outcome would be to make the play-in. You give yourself a chance at the play-in, and if you get in the play-in, obviously you can get into the playoffs. The teams that have done that in the last 4 years have been, in 2022, the New Orleans Pelicans did it. They were in the bottom seven on January 1st, 2022, and they won 24 games after that time, made it all the way to the play-in, then won in the play-in, got to the playoffs, played the one seed Suns, and played a very entertaining 6-game series. If y'all remember, that was a series where in game 6 in New Orleans, I think Chris Paul went like 14 for 14 from the field, and the Suns won game 6 by like 5. They were that close to going to a game 7. That was when Zion was hurt, but Brandon Ingram was having like a star coming out playoffs series, like a playoffs moment. And they had a rookie wing in Herb Jones and a rookie wing in Trey Murphy III that the Pels are still trying to figure out how to use. And they were like a really scrappy, fun playoff team in that year. So they managed to get into the play-in from being in the bottom seven. Under this scenario, that season would have rewarded them with the best lottery odds in 2023. Or in 2022, pardon, where the first pick ended up being Paolo Banchero. The Pelicans would have had the best lottery odds for the lotto drawing. And just so everyone knows, like the odds would have gone New Orleans and then tied Detroit and Orlando, Portland, Houston, OKC, and Indiana. That would be 1 through 7. Then 8 through 14 were locked because, again, under this New Year's freeze, 8 through 14 are frozen. Those lottery odds do not change. That is who they are. In 2023, no team that was in the bottom 7 on January 1st made the play-in. In 2024, no team, or pardon me. In 2023, there were 2 teams that were in the bottom 7 that made the play-in. It was the Los Angeles Lakers, who, again, hard to remember, but the Los Angeles Lakers, January 1st, 2023, were in the bottom 7, as were the Oklahoma City Thunder. They both ended up making the play-in, okay? And I think, I'm trying to remember correctly, was the Lakers in 2023. 2023 was the year, I guess, the Nuggets won the NBA Finals, right? Because they beat the Heat. And I believe the Nuggets beat the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals. So the Lakers, by far in this era, would have had like the most successful version of this season, where they were in the bottom 7, they made the play-in, they got through the play-in, they made the playoffs, they made the Western Conference Finals. And again, if the Lakers held on to their pick, then this performance would have given them the best lottery odds to land the prize in the 2023 draft, which would have been Victor Wembanyama, which of course would have been quite the catch. And so I can feel listeners bristle at the thought of like the Lakers of all people landing Victor Wembanyama. But keep in mind that if this were so, if this system were in place, then it would not be so easy for the Lakers to like fatten up and accumulate wins in, February, March, April, whatever, because every team would be trying because there's no incentive not to. In 2024, no team went from the bottom 7 to the play-in. Last year in 2025, no team went from bottom seven to the play-in. And this year, there is one team that currently is in the play-in that was on the bottom seven January 1st, which is the Charlotte Hornets, which, buoyed by this amazing offense now in these lineups featuring LaMelo Ball, Con Knipple, Brandon Miller, where they basically have the best offense in the league right now. They have had it for a while. They've already won like 15 games since January 1st. They're essentially lapping the field, though that field includes teams who are not trying to win. So what you more or less have is there's probably a good chance that at least one team that's in the bottom seven per year is going to make the play-in, and that team is going to like be sort of this golden opportunity where they have a superficial playoff chance because they're in the play-in, and they also have struck gold in guaranteeing themselves the highest lotto odds for the number one pick. Maybe you all think that is too rich a prize for such a season, that it should not go that way. Because, and this leads to the second criticism of this system, what about the teams that are bad and then January 1st happens and they're still bad just because they're bad? Wither the Kings, wither maybe the Wizards, although the Wizards are a bit more purposeful in what they're doing. Like, wither just like the dregs of the league. Let's please shed a tear for them. To which I say this: the current lottery system has not exactly been kind to those teams year after year. Because, number one, last year, the Mavs jumped and got Cooper Flagg, and the year before, the Hawks jumped. They picked Zachary Risache, which is on them, but they still jumped and had the opportunity to pick anybody. So it's not like the direction everything is going is to reward those teams less and less and less. I would rather there be teams that are kind of get an extra little punishment in lottery odds for being bad than to have a free-for-all where you are encouraged to be as bad as possible and you have multiple teams doing so. Again, the possible issues with this system pale in comparison to how bad everything is right now. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, having the seventh best lottery odds, which would be that's what would happen to teams that are just bad and stay bad. Like, they can't win before January the 1st, they can't win after January the 1st, and now they're stuck with the seventh worst lotto odds. First of all, you can still jump up and win the lottery. Again, Dallas, Atlanta, the previous 2 years. You can still do that. Even if you don't, theoretically 4 teams could jump you. You can go to 11th. I don't know that that's ever happened, that 4 have jumped since the flattening of these odds, but I think 3 have. I don't remember which year off the top of my head. So you're looking again at like a realistic worst case scenario is that you get the 10th pick. You get the 10th pick. Okay. So just so everyone knows, here are some players who've been available at the 10th pick in recent drafts. Okay. 2021, Tyrese Maxey, Jaden McDaniels, Desmond Bane have all been available at that slot. All right. 2022, Jalen Williams, Walker Kessler, Andrew Nembhard, Jalen Duren, Christian Brown. So out of those, Jalen Duren's an all-star this year. Jalen Williams has made All-NBA. In 2021, Tyrese Maxey is going to make All-NBA, or maybe he already has, but he's clearly an all-star, no question. Or pardon me, sorry. I did 2020. Okay, maybe I'll edit this out. Here are some players who have been available at the 10th pick. We're going to start in 2021. Okay, 10th pick, 2021. Alperen Şengün, Trey Murphy, Jalen Johnson, Herb Jones, Quentin Grimes, Cam Thomas, other players. But the big ones, I would say, Alperen Şengün, Trey Murphy, Jalen Johnson. Two of those guys have already made the All-Star team. If the Pelicans had a better record, Trey Murphy would have made it this year with how he's playing. 2022, Jalen Duren, All-NBA. Jalen Williams, All-NBA. Jalen Duren, first-time All-Star this year. Okay. Walker Kessler was available with the 10th pick. Andrew Nembhard goes in the second round. Christian Brown. But you obviously see that there was a lot of talent. Tari Eason, available in 2022. In 2023, 10th pick, Derek Lively, Cason Wallace, Keontae George, Jaime Jaquez, all available with the 10th pick. 2024, the horrible draft of 2024, with the 10th pick, Matas Buzelis, Khalil Ware, Jared McCain, Keyshawn George, AJ Mitchell, second round pick, Jalen Wells, and these were all available with the 10th pick in 2024. This past draft, 2025, Cedric Coward, Derek Queen, Carter Bryant, Kaman Malawach. These are all guys, and I could go on. These guys are less proven, obviously, but they are all available at the 10th pick in 2025. And so, again, what that essentially means is that even for these bad teams that fail under this new system and they keep getting skipped in the lottery and woe is me, there are still very likely to be at least one future All-Star on the board when they pick. And if the Kings are really who we're thinking of, if you go back to 2020, who was available at the 10th pick? Tyrese Maxey, Desmond Bane, Jaden McDaniels, and a point guard who the Kings selected at pick 12 in Tyrese Halliburton. Now, they traded Tyrese Halliburton away. And forgive me for not shedding a tear for the organization who now, would potentially complain under this spot. The All-Stars are there to draft. They are. Of course, everyone wants the highest pick because they want their pick of the players. But what matters the most is that you not pass on All-Stars. Don't pass on them. They'll be there at pick 10, but just don't pass on them. And what's more than that, the NBA is full of talent. Don't make bad moves. Make your team more competitive. Win. Just win a little, and you'll improve your odds. So again, if we're comparing the current system, which is dumb and horrible, versus this system, which is infinitely more competitive, and even the teams that lose under it are still going to have plenty of chances, plenty of bites at the apple to draft really, really good, helpful players at pick 10. Give me the New Year's freeze. Give me that one. Give me the one where the system is at its worst, baiting teams into getting too cute that is unlikely to meaningfully pay off. And at best, it just solves the problem entirely. Solves it entirely. And really does not include too many negative consequences for teams that completely fail and just lose the whole way through. So, to go back a moment to talk about how the Lakers could have had the best odds if they had their pick to draft Victor Wembanyama and all this stuff. And I think they did have their pick that year because that's when they drafted Jalen Hood-Schifino over Podziemski and Jaime Jaquez, which is funny. But so that scenario, right? Someone who likes the freeze concept in theory, but does not want to back it up all the way to January the 1st and say March 1st. That's the date I've most commonly heard. March 1st, right? Freeze it at March 1st. First of all, like I don't know who came up with March 1st. I think it's very like curious, like dumb and silly to be talking about March 1st because all the conversations now about how bad tanking is now is taking place right now in mid-February. And if the standings were frozen on March 1st, the exact same tanking environment would exist. If they went to March 1st next year, the exact same like the exact same thing would be happening that's happening right now, and everyone would still feel super bad and gross about it. So like March 1st to me is like completely out. Why would you do that? So let's all right, move it back to February 1st, which you could do. You could do that. And I'm not like super opposed in theory of doing February 1st or doing the All-Star break, but I still think that the conversation for like at least a month or a month plus really from Christmas onward in the NBA would be revolving around how aggressively these teams are all losing. I still think the same stuff would happen. January 1st carries, in my opinion, would be an extra little psychological benefit because even if you want to tank, even if teams do try to tank, it would be a story for like 2 weeks in December, realistically, because the way the media coverage works in the NBA, and I think honestly, the way that fans pay attention to the league is like a lot of them don't really even look up and take stock of the standings super aggressively until Christmas. Christmas is this big showcase for the league, all this national exposure, hopefully with a bunch of marquee matchups. And like maybe Christmas would be hurt marginally by this if one of these Christmas teams decided that they wanted to get cute and try to secure a better pick. Look, I can't do Adam Silver's entire job for him on this. He would just have to sort of like find teams very aggressively for like spitting on a Christmas Day game. And if the league did its job, then all the teams that are going to be playing on Christmas Day are not paying any mind to this sort of cuteness. They're just trying to like win as many games as possible, get 1 and 2 seeds and compete for a title. So hopefully Christmas itself is not really hurt by this. But I think that the early season, there's a little bit of boost for the NBA Cup, which I will give credit that there's a little bit of boost in terms of media coverage. Like vibes about the league are very positive around the Cup every year, even if like viewership doesn't necessarily indicate it, because it's nice to see guys playing hard, like with playoff like intensity, which does happen in the NBA Cup. It happens so much that the teams that win the Cup have like invariably suffered letdowns because they play so tough and then guys get banged up or they have trouble finding like their regular season rhythm after that because they throttle back and like they hit a little bit of a rough patch. So as long as you keep the cup, theoretically, those incentives would still hold true. Guys would still play hard, and the coverage of the league would still be in a happy place. That's happened with the cup every year. I would expect it to continue to happen. So we've got like happy vibes through the cup. Then the season is still early that like you want to cover like these surprise good teams and you want to cover the breakout stars of the league, which again tends to happen every year. Then there's this anticipation leading up until Christmas. Christmas is this big showcase. And then what happens every year in the media, I'm not even talking about fan engagement, but in the media after Christmas, there's a deep breath, there's holidays, everyone comes back and they take stock of the league in January. They see all this tanking, and that's when the vibes go. Phew. And I'm not even saying that it's right or wrong that vibes go that way. I'm saying this is how the media covers the league. And I'm someone who believes that how the media covers the league matters. I think it matters, for example, that like Shaq and Charles Barkley don't bother to learn who plays for who and they dump on the product nonstop and don't speak to how great these modern players are. That's why I think it's good that these new streamers have, the Amazon show with Nash and Nowitzki or whatever. Like it's much more positive. You want as much positive press as possible, especially if you're Adam Silver and you're trying to like AI the fan experience behind everyone's back or whatever. But you want a positive experience. So the positive vibes I think are relatively steady for the league through Christmas every year. And if these odds locked on January the 1st as opposed to February the 1st, there's almost no time for the moroseness and the winter melancholy, the seasonal affective disorder of NBA media vibes to actually set in. And so it would go from, oh, wow, we got to Christmas and look where we are. There'd be maybe like for a week, there'd be jokes about being like the tank week or whatever between Christmas and New Year's. But but like fan engagement during that time is whatever because people are on holiday. They come back, it's January 1st, boom. And then it's like, oh, we know now every night, every arena, most competitive brand of ball with the best talent in the world from here on out. That's why I think January 1st makes the most sense. It's also easier to brand because it's the New Year's freeze. Come on, New Year's freeze. Makes sense to me. So if you want to toggle the date a little bit because you want to prevent this like Lakers Wembenyama scenario from 2023, I'm happy to have that conversation. That's fine. But just remember what the Lakers needed to do was like make the play in. I think they won on like a last second shot against the Warriors, but like make the play in, win the play in, then succeed in the playoffs. Then they would have gotten this pick. I maintain that possibility, maybe it's a little cringy because it's the Lakers, but that possibility for any team is still really fun. It would give fans, first of all, fans of every team would be engaged because they'd be really rooting for their team to get the best possible lottery odds. There would be an increased like attention on the play-in race because the play-in race would be likely to include at least one of these teams, and it would be a dominant narrative about whether one of these teams can have sort of a golden season where they give themselves a chance. And in terms of like, again, the teams that are losing just still continue to lose, those fans would be bummed, but they're bummed now. You would just have fewer bummed fan bases the whole year. It would be so much more engaging and is so much more preferable to anything else. Now, as for like, I don't think this is affected by like pick protections or anything like that. If a team doesn't have its pick now, then they're not incentivized to lose. And if a team is trying to lose to keep its pick now, they'd be incentivized to win to keep their pick in the other scenario. So they'd be trying like hell anyway. So once again, just to summarize, New Year's freeze means you lock standings January 1st. It means that teams that are 8th through 14th in record, their odds are done. Those are their odds. Teams 1 through 7, everything resets to 0. Their losses no longer matter for purposes of their lottery odds. 100% of their lottery odds are dependent on their winning percentage from January the 1st on. That's the way to do it. That is the measure. Other people might say, "Oh, well, you can abolish the draft." I can have those conversations. That's fine. But in case that's too radical, and I assume it is for ownership right now, this is the way to do it. You think you're smarter than the rest of the league? You think you can game the system? By all means, take a season with expectations and purposely start dumping on it so that you're in the bottom 7 of the league in January 1st and see where it gets you. See how cute you can be. See how forgiving your fans are for being so cute. Go for it. Be interesting to follow as a fan. And it would encourage, again, the most important thing is that tanking after January 1st would be solved overnight. It would be just absolutely overnight. And everything would be so competitive. The problem, like, I think part of the reluctance to discount the connection between losses and lottery odds currently is that there's a sense that like hopeless teams are just like so hopeless if they don't get a top pick. I already went through the players who are available at pick 10, like recently. Like I said, there is likely to be an all-star or a future all-star or future all-NBA player at pick 10 every year. It's been that way this decade, every single year. 2024, 2025, those guys haven't made the all-star game yet, but give them time. Secondly, uh, the people in the media who might have an opposition to this or might wince at it, they grew up, and I grew up in the same time as most of these guys, where the talent in the league was not as deep as it is now. Where like bad teams were bad, where in a given year there might only be like three title contenders, and half the league was just sort of like spinning its wheels and had no real chance. That's not the case anymore. There's much more parity in the league and much more talent. That's evidenced by the fact that tanking is even like intentional tanking is even possible in the first place. There's an assumption that if the Utah Jazz were playing their entire rotation, they'd be winning games and they'd be decent, you know? And that's the point. There's enough talent around in the NBA that if you just play it, if you just unlock it and let it run and let it flourish, then you're going to have great games all the time. Guys will still get injured. You still got to do something to try to prevent injuries. But again, that would exist in any system. This isn't going to solve that, but it's not going to make it any worse. And I believe that turnarounds in the NBA are easier now than they were 20 years ago because it's easier to acquire talent. You've got to have the right coaching to make it all fit and flow, but there's no lack of talent. So get the talent, play the talent, and see what happens with your league. The media would be cozier because they'd have less time to get sad after Christmas. Fans would be more engaged because there's more stuff to pay attention to and more things to lock in for and root for throughout March. March goes from like dog days to like, let's go. I am on the edge of my seat for my team's games. And the quality of play would be better because it would need to be, because the incentives would make it so. So that's my thought on the New Year's freeze. Implement it, give it a shot, watch how fun it is. It would be so much better than what we all have to deal with now. Thank you for listening. This has been Chucking Darts. It's okay to be wrong about sports. Find your dartboard and start chucking. Thank you.